Shall I round us off then with Once Upon a Time?
Say, yes.
Sorry.
Was our final film we've actually covered on the podcast before, and Scott and I have both spoken about it. So
fair enough.
It might be quite interesting to see quite how this film struck you, Craig.
Oh, I don't remember listening to that particular episode, so there we go. So yes, this might be interesting. Described alternately by the director himself as either his magnum opus and or his love letter to the golden age of Hollywood, Once Upon a Time, ellipsis, in Hollywood, is the most recent of Tarantino's efforts, and if I may jump the gun and go straight to some sort of conclusion, a pretty good distillation of his craft to date. Based loosely on the histories of a number of Hollywood leading man stunt double partnerships, though none so much as that of Burt Reynolds and Hal Needham, Once Upon a Time largely follows fading 60s TV Western star Rick Dalton, Leonardo DiCaprio, and his longtime stunt double Cliff Booth, Brad Pitt, as they find their careers on the wane at the cusp of a new decade in both filmmaking and social norms. Battling rampant alcoholism, Dalton's relationship with Booth has become more of a client-minder affair, their codependency unexpectedly pure and bereft of cynicism, their unspoken affection for each other completely intangible, yet obvious through their dynamic. Woven into the Dalton-Booth dynamic almost as an aside, the movie's secondary plot thread follows the tragic figure of Sharon Tate, Margot Robbie, as her own career gathered pace, though her fate, as history books have it, is rewritten in a startlingly revisionist piece of corrective chronology. Sound familiar? If there is a point to the movie, it appears to be as an outlet for Tarantino's dream of how the 60s should have closed out, a sort of time-travelling restorative justice perhaps. One suspects, however, that the more important thing here is the journey, and what a journey it is. As Tate, Dalton and Booth pursue their dreams and battle their demons respectively, Tarantino presents late 60s Hollywood as a rich tapestry of character, sounds and visuals, pulling together all of the tools he's collected over a quarter century to sculpt perhaps his most mature work since Jackie Brown, if not of his career. That's not to say Once Upon a Time is dull or bereft of those hallmarks we've become familiar with. In fact, far from it. The one or two instances of violence serve to remind us how ugly that violence is. The soundtrack is, of course, cooler than cool, and the cameos from recognisable faces are even more numerous than ever. Rather, it's the way we as viewers are never in doubt as to how these aspects are fully in service of the story, rather than Tarantino's ego on this occasion, that impressed me most. And the same can be said of his clearly affectionate nods to incidental characters such as Bruce Lee and Steve McQueen. Yes, you heard me, Bruce Lee and Steve McQueen are incidental characters in this movie. I understand that in the case of Mike Moe's fantastic portrayal of Lee, some feathers were ruffled, not least of all among the martial arts legend's family, but let's just say my mileage varied on that one, and I think this, along with the rest of the name-checking, is both wholly justified and unbelievably entertaining. Remarkably, given conversations we have frequently around these parts, including about 5 minutes ago, Once Upon a Time completely justifies its length, and in fact, at a running time just shy of 2 3/4 hours, this is one of those rare occasions where I could easily have spent another hour with these characters without fearing fatigue. One understands there may be a 3 or even 4 hour cut to be released at some point in the near future, and I, for one, would like you to take my money now. If indeed this proves to be Tarantino's penultimate picture, it leaves me in great anticipation of what his parting gift to us all will be. If instead he awakes one morning and unexpectedly declares Kill Bill was 2 separate movies after all, then it's hard to imagine a better or more fitting way to cap off a career in movies than this immensely enjoyable love letter to that medium's heyday.
I saw this in the cinema last year. Scott and I spoke about it on the podcast last year, and I liked it a lot. And curiously, I liked it a bit less this time.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's maybe just because compared to all of the other films that Tarantino's done, it's the most recent rewatch. So perhaps I'm slightly more familiar with it. But watching it this time, though, I still enjoy it a great deal. I still cackle like a demon at the ridiculous violence at the end and still worry about myself more than a little. And I continue to not have the same issue that Scott espoused when we spoke about it, which is that he thought it was like excessive violence to women, and I just don't read it like that. It would be interesting to see if Scott still does, if he has watched it again. But again, I am left with the same question at the end: is why Sharon Tate? Particularly, Sharon Tate isn't a character in this film. She's basically a person who's there in the background, right? Why? You could make this film about this setting, this time period, some references to people, certainly, but why why this person's story? Why that in the background? And the ending is somehow making it that Sharon Tate's horrible murder didn't happen. I don't understand why that's the point of the story. And it really bothers me because it adds nothing. In fact, I feel it detracts substantially from the rest of the film. And I'm just, I don't know, offended isn't the word, but I'm certainly baffled as to why that's in there. Because you're not given any information about Sharon Tate. I think what I said the last time is what I'm going to say now is that what happened to her was a horrible tragedy. It was a horrible, horrible thing that happened to her, and perhaps she would have been a wonderful mother, and perhaps she would have had a great career in films. Who knows? But she wasn't a particularly significant actress, so that it's not like you're immediately sure that she would have had this great career. And lots of horrible things happen. It's like, why is the Manson family Sharon Tate in this at all? That's the biggest problem I have with it.
Yeah,
I'm finished now, Craig.
No, it's all right. The Manson thing's good as well. The thing, you're right. The thing that stuck out for me as well was, right, I get it that at the end, Dalton has earned his right to that pool party that, you know, that he and Booth were talking about earlier. Like, I could only be one pool party away with what's his name? Oh God, his name's gone right out of my head.
Peter Polanski?
Yeah, Roman Polanski. I could just be one pool party with Polanski away from reigniting my career. Knowing what we know about Polanski, could we pick someone else?
Yeah, that was another thing. Apologies. Like, also, there's a Polanski thing in a person from a director who had his entire career associated with the Weinsteins. Not so on board with that.
Oh, this is going to ruin this for me. The more we talk about this, the more it's going to ruin it, and I really, really enjoyed it.
My thinking on this hasn't evolved all that much since last we spoke about it. I'm still bemused, befuddled and bewildered by all of the real life, if you will, Hollywood aspects that have been put into this. It's an entire B story that has no place to in there and has nothing to do with the actual enjoyable bits in it. It'd be a much stronger film without it. You've spoken about Sharon Tate. I just don't see... I see the references from what Tarantino's been interviewed and what he's saying about it, and it's like, I wanted to show more of Sharon Tate as a character, but if you wanted to show more of Sharon Tate as a character, why didn't you show more of Sharon Tate as a character? Because she isn't.
Because she's not a character.
What I learned about Sharon Tate from this film, what I learned from it is that she bought a book once. So, there's that startling insight, but the rest of it, and I was trying to work out...
She's terrible tasting... Terrible tasting glasses.
Yes.
We know that too.
Between that and I was trying to work out the exact chronological timeline of exactly when Bruce Lee pissed in Quentin Tarantino's cornflakes, but because I don't have any other explanation for that.
I want to speak of, like, the Bruce Lee thing. It's inexplicable, right? I was like,
it's inexplicable, and I laughed my ass off.
I have, however,
that's exactly where I'm going.
There is one thing I'd get to, because I have come to the conclusion after watching all of these films back to back in chronological order. Basically, what I've come to, what he was Tarantino was trying to say there was that I thought this would be cool and or funny. Because that is the level of depth that he's put into everything that he's done so far. So on that basis, I kind of now give it...
That's a clear...
You're giving me the hiccups now.
I now kind of appreciate this film a little bit more because of that. I now understand what Quentin Tarantino was trying to say is nothing. So with that kind of zen Cohen in mind, I can forgive it a lot of what it's trying to do. The same thing with the kind of violence towards women. I do think it is still a bit more gratuitous, the way that it really does focus on the close-ups of that poor woman's face getting... Well, not poor woman, I suppose, but her face being
smashed
stabbed
into the mantelpiece.
It is gruesome, but in the context of everything that he's done, you know what? I don't think it means anything other than he thought it would be funny. So, I'm now kind of giving him a pass because I don't think he's ever trying to say anything other than I thought it would be cool. That is, if anything, all I can say about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But all these, the annoying thing is, if you take all these bits out, these bits that I just don't think of any, like Damien Lewis, what? Why are you here? Go away, Damien Lewis. We don't like you in the first place, let alone when you're trying to be Steve McQueen with that weird haircut.
We still haven't forgiven you for Dreamcatcher, Damien Lewis.
Yes.
Go and talk to Duddits.
Yeah. But look, all that stuff aside, DiCaprio and Brad Pitt are fantastic in it, and all that, but all that arc of his. If you got rid of all that, you can keep the Manson family in if you like. That kind of works for what we're doing here. All of the rest of it, I think, is really enjoyable. I really enjoyed all that stuff, and DiCaprio's fabulous in this. Really great performance and really interesting character. Same with Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt's the standout for me.
just great stuff, and I really, really enjoy all of that stuff. And it's just undercut by I just bewilderment by the rest of it. It's like, again, this just should have been on the cutting room floor. I don't necessarily think it feels too long, but again, if you just chopped all that stuff that I was complaining about there out, it would be a really, really, really enjoyable 90-ish 2-hour film, as opposed to a really enjoyable 2-hour film with another 45 minutes of weird stuff in there that I don't quite understand why it's there.
I don't know, I really do enjoy this film. It's, again, my overarching criticism, like, it's why Sharon Tate, and like there are certainly suggestions or references to Natalie Wood's death.
Yes,
with Brad Pitt's character, whose wife called Natalie died in a boat. It's like, that's super subtle,
close to the mark.
Well
yeah,
done. And kind of, I don't know, it's like Christopher Walken was implicated in that as well. He's been in one of Quentin Tarantino's films too, so I feel like he's stabbing him in the back.
Yep.
But yeah, it was like, you have that, you see, but that works because it's just a reference to stuff that was happening in Hollywood then.
Yeah.
Right? But when you have Sharon Tate like front and centre as like I was like the cause celeb of this film, like, why is that in there? It's so frustrating because the rest of it I find so entertaining, and like why Quentin Tarantino's decided to make Bruce Lee an absolute asshat and then get his arse handed to him by Brad Pitt. Why he's done that, I don't know. You know what? I also don't care because I laughed like a drain in that scene because it's really, really funny.
People, I know, and I think it was maybe Bruce Lee's daughter taking exception at the fact, he's just been portrayed as being incredibly arrogant. Sorry? Bruce Lee didn't have any arrogance about him, because I've seen plenty of archive footage of Bruce Lee being incredibly arrogant. He was also an incredibly talented performer and martial artist, but please don't tell me he wasn't arrogant. And I don't think it's I don't know what the purpose of including those scenes were, but man, I laughed my ass off, and
yes,
I'm grateful for that.
That very much was the purpose of including those scenes.
Yes, and then you get
in my memory that scene is actually considerably longer.
Yes,
because it's actually quite short, but it's like in my memory because it had such an impact. It's like 3 times the length.
And then he appears again later on in just a really quick as part of a montage scene. Sparring with someone, and he seems happy enough, and it's not poking any fun at him. And I'm not sure what the purpose of him reappearing there is, but I was like, oh, there's Bruce, and he seems happy. Cool. No offense taken.
And also, I don't know if he ever actually made such comments about Muhammad Ali, but if he did, well, he deserved to get his ass handed to him by Brad Pitt because Muhammad Ali would have wasted him.
Do you know, and the funniest thing about that scene is that as I was watching that scene of Brad Pitt handing Cliff Booth handing Bruce Lee his ass, I'd forgotten that we were essentially viewing that in flashback, and then as the reason why Booth had been booted off the set, and then it immediately cuts back to Booth fixing the aerial on the roof, and he just nods and goes, fair enough.
It's really funny.
That was amazing. Brad Pitt is the heart of this movie, and I think this is maybe my favourite Brad Pitt role ever. I really could just watch Cliff Booth knock about, just being just like affable and genuine, and his friendship with Dalton. There's something just really pure about it that I just don't think we've seen in a Tarantino film before. I really appreciated it.
I can't think of a time I've enjoyed Brad Pitt more.
Yeah,
I think perhaps one of the reasons I was so disappointed with him in Inglourious Basterds on the second watch is because I knew how good he was in this, and how kind of nondescript he is in Inglourious Basterds. I honestly think that's more the script than his performance. I don't think he's given a huge amount to work.
I think in Bastards he's Brad Pitt, and in this film he's Cliff Booth. I think that's the problem there.
Yeah, it's great. If there's any problems I have with this film, maybe it's casting, because this film reminded me that Emile Hirsch is a thing, and I still don't remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, Leonardo DiCaprio is somebody who, in the last maybe 10 or 15 years, I've come to like a lot. I think he's somebody he aged into his looks and his talent. He just never looked right for a long time. Mm-hmm. And then I've come to appreciate him. I love him in The Wolf of Wall Street, and he's also great in this. And then he's actually got some of the best scenes in the film, like when he's doing that Western with the little girl who just completely like the world's oldest 8-year-old.
Yeah.
You just get some great scenes as well. So it's just such an entertaining film. And again, the more I think about it, the more frustrated I get about the one bit of it that I really don't like because I don't know why it's in there, and it's so unnecessary. Because the rest of it is so entertaining, and I mean, it's 60s Hollywood. It's such an appealing looking place. All those advertising hoardings and neon signs and stuff, and the Californian light.
Yep.
See, that time and place, and the cars. It's such an appealing place. It looks so good, and the films that have been made.
For all those reasons that I find this is best looking film. I know what you're saying about Hateful Eight, but I could sit and watch this. I could turn the sound off and watch this for nearly 3 hours again, no problem.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'd entertain the argument certainly, but they're not directly comparable because they look so different, and it's. One's more about framing and the other's more about light for me. So I can't necessarily...
it's apples and oranges.
Yeah. But yeah, it's so appealing. And like, then you've got actors, like, once again, you occasionally he'll like resurrect an actor's career that's been seemingly moribund for ages. Like, like Al Pacino acting again for the first time in like 100 years or something, you know? It's like, and it's a kind of daft role, but I could have stood another 10 minutes of that quite comfortably.
Yep. Just don't call him Schwartz.
Yes. Yeah, it's weird. It's like you could just cut out have the Manson. Maybe that's it. Maybe you leave the Manson family in as much as like Brad Pitt goes to the ranch that day, sees Bruce Dern, and that's their mention of the Manson family, and you know that's the era that it's happening in, and leave it at that, and that would have worked. But the fact that they're the climax of the film, no, it's kind of I do not like that. It's not enough to tarnish the rest of the film. I enjoy it so much. It's just this big why hanging over the whole thing, and it's very frustrating.
It's not ghoulish, but it's ghoulish adjacent.
Yeah.
I was going to say I don't have a problem with it at all, but that's a fair enough comment, Scott, actually. It's ghoulish adjacent. I think that's quite a nice summation. Sorry.